He's Guru. He's Guru. Before I get to the second question, let me point something very interesting out. I have proven without a doubt that at least Tamal and Satsvarup, and likely the others present in that meeting, knew that Srila Prabhupada had been speaking of setting up a Rtvik system prior to this meeting. At least some of them, at least Tamal and Satsvarup knew this. And they were satisfied with that. The nature of these two questions they asked wasn't aimed to challenge that Rtvik system. They weren't asking Srila Prabhupada if what he was planning on doing was scripturally sound or not. They were only asking how to conduct these type of initiations. And they just wanted to know if the Rtvik would be worshipped like a guru or not. But all of them were surrendered to accepting whatever system Srila Prabhupada wanted. These GBC men were Srila Prabhupada's loving disciples. And if this was what he wanted, they would accept it, that's all. The same way they had accepted all the previous aspects of the Rtvik process over the previous 7 to 9 years, as Srila Prabhupada had delegated more and more aspects of the initiation process. First, he delegated assessing the new bhaktas. He had delegated that process to the temple presidents. He delegated performing fire yajna, and then he delegated chanting on the beads and giving spiritual names even. He delegated chanting the Gayatri mantra in the ear of the new Brahmin initiate. Srila Prabhupada had at different times delegated all these different aspects. And when he did so, there is no record at any of his disciples of ever having objected or challenging the validity of what Srila Prabhupada was doing. No one asked him to justify that he could delegate these aspects. No, whatever Srila Prabhupada told us, we all just accepted it. And that was the same here with these men regarding this Rtvik system. These men were prepared to accept and carry out whatever system Srila Prabhupada instructed them to set up. There have been Rtvik Ras supporters over the years who have tried to argue that these men knew that Srila Prabhupada wanted a Rtvik system, but they wanted to be guru so badly that they purposefully went against his desires and lied to all of us and what Srila Prabhupada really wanted. No, I do not support that at all. And there is no evidence of that. The evidence does not show this. Although the evidence does show that these men made mistakes and they misunderstood what he was saying and the remaining part of this conversation. And I do conclude the reason why they misunderstood was because they had those strong desires to want to be guru. But they went into this meeting fully prepared to accept and implement whatever system, including the Rtvik Representative system, that Srila Prabhupada wanted. But still, they had strong mundane desires, and that is what caused them to totally misunderstand the rest of the conversation. Tamal and Hamsaduta have both admitted that they had strong desire to want to become the or one of the next gurus after Prabhupada left. From the 1980 Topanga Canyon, Tamal Krishna is speaking, and I'll quote, "Actually, Srila Prabhupada never appointed any gurus. He appointed 11 Ritviks. He never appointed them gurus. Myself and the other GBC have done the greatest disservice to this movement the last 3 years because we interpreted the appointment of Ritviks as the appointment of gurus. What actually happened was that Prabhupada mentioned he might be appointing some Ritviks, so the GBC met for various reasons, and they went to Srila Prabhupada, 5 or 6 of us, and we asked him, Srila Prabhupada, after your departure, if we accept disciples, whose disciples will they be, your disciples or mine? I can definitely say for myself, for which I humbly beg forgiveness from everybody, that there was definitely some degree of trying to control. This is the conditioned nature, and it came out in the highest position of all, guru, Oh, wonderful. Now I am Guru, and there is only 11 of us. You cannot show me anything on tape or in writing where Srila Prabhupada says, I appoint these 11 as gurus. It does not exist because he never appointed any gurus. That is a myth. End of quote. That is actually Tamal speaking in 1980. Now let's go to the second question on this topic, which was the fourth question on the written list of questions. The question as it was written down was, 4, what is the relationship of this person who gives this initiation to the person he gives it to? As I've explained, this question was written down prior to the meeting. It isn't that Satsvarup came up with this question after they asked the first question. And as I previously pointed out, this question was really asking about the relationship of the Rtvik who performs the ceremonies on behalf of the actual guru. The GBC wanted to know if that Rtvik priest would be worshipped the same as a guru. And that's what they really wanted to know. If the GBC want to claim that they were not asking about the Rtvik system, then this is a real zinger of a dumb question, because the way they worded it, they would have been asking what the relationship was of the actual guru who initiates his disciple. Duh. He's guru. Duh. But they were trying to ask what the relationship of the Rtvik priest was. And they hadn't heard that yet, right? If they were thinking that, if we were to understand that Prabhupada hadn't talked about a Rtvik system before, then this is the first time they heard it. But no, because they wrote this question down before the meeting. So, and you can see, the question doesn't make any sense if they're asking about a regular guru, a regular initiation. If Prabhupada hadn't talked about that yet, and they asked this question, what is the relationship of the person who gives initiation with the person who's initiated? That's a dumb question to ask, right? If it's about a regular guru who gives regular initiations. So then it's always been understood that they were asking about the Rtvik priest. But remember, this question was written down before the meeting, you see. So it proves that they were asking, that they knew about the Rtvik system before. But they just didn't word the question correctly. As I've previously pointed out, the way the question was written, but they were asking about this initiation, indicating that they weren't asking about a regular initiation. They were asking about this one, this Rtvik that you've been talking about, this Rtvik process. But Satsvarup made a small change to this question when he went to ask it. And that small mistake is what started setting these men into mistakenly thinking Srila Prabhupada was saying something totally different than what he was saying. Well, actually, no, that is not entirely true. The real beginning of their misunderstanding was not hearing and acknowledging the 5 key words after this is settled up. That is where they really started to getting everything wrong at that point. If they had properly heard those key words, they wouldn't have even been asking this second question. They would have realized the system wasn't settled up yet, and anything could change until it's finally settled, so they wouldn't even bothered with the second question. So previously, Srila Prabhupada had asked various GBC men to perform initiation ceremonies on his behalf. He had previously asked these many times over the many years while he was still present, at least somewhere on the planet. He never instructed that they were to be given any special relationship, that there was to hold any special relationship between those men who performed the ceremonies on his behalf, or various aspects of the initiation procedures on his behalf, and those who were initiated. Sometimes the GBC men would chant on the beads rather than Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada never encouraged the new initiates to hold that GBC with some special awe and reverence on the level of the spiritual master. But now that Srila Prabhupada will be leaving, the GBC appeared to be asking if that would change. Would those who perform the ceremonies and other procedural aspects on his behalf, would they have any special relationship with the new initiates? In other words, even though Srila Prabhupada will be that devotee's initiating guru, would these Ritviks now be given the respect and worship that is actually given to the Guru, since Prabhupada wasn't going to be there? That was really the question they intended to ask. But that is not what Satsvarup actually asked.
Then what is the relationship of that person who gives the initiation and the
His Guru?
These men were a bit puzzled by his answer. It appears to them that Srila Prabhupada had just told them that these officiating Ritvik acharyas were the actual Guru? But that didn't add up. Officiating Ritvik would most likely mean one who performs ceremonies. The Ritvik is one who performs ceremonies and officiating, so they're doing it on behalf of the actual acharya, and they're not the actual Guru. But and that is what Srila Prabhupada had been telling Tamal, and Tamal had told at least some of the other GBC men that Srila Prabhupada, he would remain the actual Guru, and that the Ritviks would just perform the ceremonies on his behalf. But now it appears to them that Srila Prabhupada had just said that the Ritvik is the Guru. They were trying to ask Prabhupada about the Ritvik, what his relationship was, and Prabhupada said, he's Guru, he's Guru. Well, that is one way this could be taken. At least that is the way these men sort of understood it at the time. But there are two other possible understandings. One is that, well, Srila Prabhupada did originally refer to these men as Ritvik acharyas. And then here he just called them officiating acharyas. The word acharya and guru are synonymous. So within the title Srila Prabhupada was originally using, he included the word acharya, guru. But were they to be the actual Diksha Guru or just the assistant priest to the acharya? So yes, it may be that in May of 1977, when Srila Prabhupada was just forming his ideas for this Ritvik system, that he did give the title Rtvik Acharya, and then he gave the title officiating Acharya. So yes, he may have been considering them to be some sort of assistant to the Guru, where they would actually be referred to as some sort of assistant Guru. But that doesn't really make that much sense. Still, I'm trying to present, possible scenarios. So when they asked, what is the position? He's Guru. Well, he's some sort of Guru. He's not the actual Guru. We'll get to that in just a minute. But maybe he's some sort of Guru. Anyway, that is one possible scenario. The thing is that as Srila Prabhupada told these men right at the beginning, this Ritvik system, this system, and how it's to work, how it's to be conducted, this wasn't settled up yet. After this is settled, then he will appoint some to act as some sort of Ritvik Acharya, some sort of Acharya, Rtvik Acharya, officiating Acharya. But as of May 28th, this wasn't settled yet. So even if in May of 1977, he was considering these Ritviks would be some sort of assistant Guru or whatever, Rtvik Acharya, then when he finally settled this with the July 9th letter, he changed their final and settled up title to Rtvik Representative of the Acharya. He dropped the direct Acharya part of the title and settled on calling them representatives of the actual Acharya, which really, when you combine officiating Rtvik Acharya, it would mean a Rtvik representative of the Acharya. So even if in May, when this wasn't settled up yet, he was considered they would be called some sort of officiating Guru, by July, when he settled on the final system, that was no longer consideration. They were just to be Rtvik representatives of the Acharya. So this is one way we could view this. And another way was, number two, Srila Prabhupada wasn't referring to the Ritviks at all when he answered Satsvarup's question. Satsvarup was intending to ask if the Ritvik would hold any special relationship with the newly initiated devotee. But there was this problem. The way this question was written down on the prepared list, was to ask about the person who gives this initiation, but Satsvarup changed this to the, a rather seemingly benign mistake. But what this turned the already not that clearly written question, and it turned into something even much more unclear. The question no longer pointed to the Rtvik who performs this Rtvik initiation, but rather to the person who gives the initiation. Srila Prabhupada didn't even let Satsvarup complete his question. He simply interrupted and said, "He's Guru. He's Guru." But who gives the initiation? The Rtvik performs the ceremony, but he is not the one who gives initiation. Now, some may complain that this is splitting hairs. They will argue that Srila Prabhupada understood that the question was asking about the relationship between the Rtvik and the initiate. But I disagree. Yes, used here in this question, the term give initiation could have been taken to refer to the Rtvik or to the actual guru who is really giving the initiation. However, it really only makes sense if Srila Prabhupada took the term in the literal sense to mean the guru who actually gives the initiation. This isn't about splitting hairs. It's about understanding this issue, understanding the conversation properly. For example, in 1975, I was given Brahman initiation by Srila Prabhupada. But His Divine Grace wasn't physically present at the initiation ceremony. He wasn't present at the LA temple where the initiation ceremony took place. The devotee who performed the ceremony was His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj. He acted as the Rtvik priest by performing the ceremony on Srila Prabhupada's behalf. Oh, we didn't use that term Rtvik representative then, but that was his function. That was the function he performed. He was the Rtvik priest. He performed the initiation ceremony as a Rtvik representative of Srila Prabhupada. Yet Hridayananda Maharaj wasn't the person who gave me initiation. I was given Brahman initiation by Srila Prabhupada, not by the Rtvik priest. And that is the way we all of us talk that way. And we referred to this like this at that time. In 1975, no one referred to Hridayananda or any other of the GBC whom Srila Prabhupada had, authorized to perform these ceremonies on his behalf. No one ever referred to those devotees. Oh, he was the one who gave me initiation. Oh, Hridayananda gave me Brahman initiation. No one thought of it in that way. No one spoke of it in that way. He performed the ceremony on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, but Srila Prabhupada is the one who gave me the initiation. This is not splitting hairs. This is how we spoke. This is how we referred to it at that time. This was the correct and proper terminology. While some may argue that Srila Prabhupada really knew what Satsvarup was intending to ask, I completely disagree, because in the overall view of the situation, it would make no sense. To reinforce this point as a hypothetical example, I will ask a slightly different question, but using that same terminology. Say someone were to have asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, what do they call the person who gives initiation?
He's Guru. He's Guru.
Using the same exact terminology of asking what we call the person who gives the initiation, we can easily see how the correct response would be, he's Guru. Such an answer would be expected and proper. What do we call the person who gives initiation?
He's Guru.
What is the relationship of the person who gives the initiation?
He's Guru.
So we can see asking what we call the person or what is the relationship. Srila Prabhupada most certainly could have taken the question in this way. What if I were to have asked Srila Prabhupada, we'll get there. What if I were to ask Srila Prabhupada, what was the relationship of Hridayananda who performed my Brahman and thread ceremony? Srila Prabhupada would not have replied, he's Guru. No, there was no special relationship. He was a senior godbrother who Srila Prabhupada had authorized to perform the ceremonial procedures on Prabhupada's behalf, and that was all. Again, if we were to have asked, what do we call the person who gives initiation? He's Guru, would be the correct response. What do we call the person who performs the ceremonies? He's a Rtvik priest. Totally different answers depending upon the terminology and the words asked. What is the relationship of the person who gives initiation? He's Guru. What is the person called who gives initiation? He's Guru. The reply Srila Prabhupada gave was the proper answer in regard to the terminology of the question that was asked. Srila Prabhupada was asked referring to the actual Guru who gives the actual initiation and not. He was not being asked about the Rtvik Representative who simply performs the ceremony on behalf of the actual Guru. But another objection I have seen to this understanding is that this would mean that when Srila Prabhupada replied, he's Guru, he would have been referring to himself, but in the third person. Since in this Rtvik representative system, he would still be the one who's giving the initiation. The objection, they say, is that they argue that Srila Prabhupada wouldn't have replied referring to himself in the third person. Well, my counter-argument to this is that he did so because of the way the question was asked and the situation. First of all, I'm going to insert here, just if you asked, if someone had asked Srila Prabhupada, what do you call the person who gives initiation? He's Guru. Even if Srila Prabhupada was being asked about himself in that way, he was being asked in a third-person sense, because they weren't asking. We're just going to go to that hypothetical question, that if someone had asked Srila Prabhupada, what do you call the person who gives initiation? Oh, he's Guru. And yet Srila Prabhupada is the one who's giving initiation. So if you ask Srila Prabhupada, what is your position to the person who's being initiated? Oh, I'm Guru, I'm Guru. See, then he would have answered in the first person. But if you just ask in the third person in this, you're just asking about the general system. What do you call the person who gives initiation? He's Guru. What do you call the person? What's the relation to the person who gives initiation? He's Guru. The situation was that the GBC had just asked a technical question about the process of how representative initiations would be conducted after Srila Prabhupada's departs. These men weren't addressing Srila Prabhupada personally. They had inquired about the system itself and not about Srila Prabhupada in a personal way. And the second question was again asking about that system. In that system, what is the relationship of the person who gives the initiation? Srila Prabhupada took it that they were asking about the system and not about him personally. And they were asking about the Guru in this third-party way. When Srila Prabhupada, he wasn't addressing Srila Prabhupada in the first person, he was addressing him in the third-person sense. And because, he didn't ask, what is your relationship? He asked, what is the relationship of that person who gives the initiation? Since Prabhupada would be the one giving the initiation, then the question was asking about him, but they weren't asking him in the first-person sense. They were asking, Satsvarupa was asking in a third-person sense, and therefore Srila Prabhupada answered it in the way it was asked. Just as if he would have asked, someone asked, what do you call the person who gives initiation? And Prabhupada's giving the initiation. Prabhupada said, oh, he's Guru. But they were asking it in a third-person sense, so Prabhupada would reply in a third person. Instead of saying, I'm Guru, because they didn't ask, what is your position? What do you call that? You who are giving the initiation, what do you call the person? So what's the relationship? Anyway, so they're asking in a third-person sense. Prabhupada replied in that third-person sense. So it is not all that unusual, for him to have replied in that way. As I said, the question was not worded properly. Because of that, and because the details of this system were not settled yet, this answer that he's Guru is not something that we can pin anything down and say, no, Prabhupada wanted the Ritviks to be Gurus. It's not there. That is not a substantial question or a substantial argument, because that question is so vague And it could have been interpreted in many different ways, and it didn't make sense in the way that he had asked it. So, and especially given the next question and the response. When Srila Prabhupada said that he's Guru, it is also revealing that Satsvarupa's response was, he asked,
but he does it on your behalf.
As I have been arguing, I've proven that Srila Prabhupada spoke of the Rtvik system prior to this meeting, and that Tamal had shared this with at least Satsvarup. And what Srila Prabhupada had told Tamal previously, according to Gauridas Pandit, who was, the only other person present when Srila Prabhupada spoke with Tamal and explained this system, was that the Ritviks would only conduct the ceremonies on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, and his divine grace would remain the actual guru. Thus, even though Satsvarup thought he was asking what the relationship was of the Ritvik, and he thought Srila Prabhupada was saying that the Ritvik is guru, but Srila Prabhupada is actually answering about himself in the third-party sense, but that isn't the way the question was asked. But anyway, Satsvarupa is thinking that Prabhupada had just said that the Ritvik was guru. But that wasn't what Tamal had told them that Srila Prabhupada had said. So, he had said that the Ritviks would be officiating, performing on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. So Satsvarupa asked, but he does it on your behalf. Because he's convinced that this Ritvik will be initiating on Prabhupada's behalf, because that's what Tamal had told them that Srila Prabhupada had said. So even though he's hearing that Ritvik is guru, or this priest, this person who's conducting the initiation is guru, he still said, but he does it on your behalf. Now wires are getting crossed all over the place. Satsvarup wires were crossed when he thought he was asking about the Ritvik, and Srila Prabhupada understood his question that he was talking about him, the person who gives initiation. So why is Satsvarup now asking Prabhupada if he does the initiation on his own behalf? Well, Prabhupada answers, yes, but he knows now that they were not really, he knows what they were really asking. They were asking about the relationship they weren't asking about the relationship of the actual guru, they were asking about the Ritvik, about themselves. Will they have a guru-like relationship with those who they perform the ceremonies for? Now Srila Prabhupada is starting to understand what they're getting at. And he understands what they are really wanting to know. So he says, yes, the Ritviks will initiate on his behalf, and then he explains that in his presence, that is a formality. Prior to this meeting, Srila Prabhupada had only spoken of setting up an ongoing Rtvik representative system. When the GBC asked Tamal to go in and ask Srila Prabhupada who was going to be the next Acharya, Srila Prabhupada had told him he was going to set up a Ritvik system and he would remain the initiating guru even after he departs. This is the only thing that Srila Prabhupada had talked about at that point up to then about how the initiations would continue. So when he dictated his final will, he instructed how the system of management for the society was not to change. Yet since he had announced that he would be leaving this world soon, he had not said anything about the next Acharya or the actual successors, gurus. He had not given an instruction since regarding how any disciples would become themselves actual gurus. He had only spoke of the Ritvik system and how he would continue to act as guru, to be giving the initiations via this authorized Ritvik system. But that wasn't going to be permanent forever and ever. At some point, when his disciple or some disciples become fully qualified, Srila Prabhupada will give them the order to become guru, just like Bhaktisiddhanta did with Srila Prabhupada. That came decades later, after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta left this world. So Srila Prabhupada, but he hadn't settled up how the Ritvik's part was to be conducted. But it is at this point in the conversation that Srila Prabhupada is understanding what these men are really asking. They're asking about themselves. How will they become actual gurus rather than just Prabhupada's Rtvik representative? Thus, Srila Prabhupada changes his focus away from the Rtvik system. Since that system was not settled yet anyway, there was really no point in continuing to talk about that for now. So Srila Prabhupada shifts his focus and begins speaking about those who will someday become actual or regular gurus. These are two entirely separate groups, the Rtvik representatives and the actual gurus. Srila Prabhupada is speaking about them totally separate from one another. But the GBC men present misunderstood. They hadn't changed their focus along with Srila Prabhupada, so they continue to ask about the Rtvik representatives. Yet in the remaining part of this conversation, Srila Prabhupada was answering their questions as they pertained to the actual gurus, not the Rtvik representatives. The GBC men didn't understand this, and they wound up getting totally and completely lost and misunderstood what Srila Prabhupada was saying in the remaining minute of this conversation. And and there was ample misuse of words, somewhat on both sides, actually, as I will show.